So in February of 2026, the tech sector laid off about 108,000 workers.
Just a massive, massive number.
Right. But in that exact same 30-day window, salaries for people holding, very specific AI skills, they skyrocketed, like carrying a 56% premium.
Yeah, it was a wildly volatile month.
It really was. We're talking about this violent fracturing of the labor market, and it's driven entirely by, well, machines that can code a functional website or, I don't know, analyze a whole corporate database in about 10 seconds.
10 seconds, yeah, if that.
Right. So keeping that reality in mind, I want you to look at the stack of sources we brought in for today's deep dive. Because
It's like the pile.
it is, it's unhinged.
Yeah.
We have the AI Generalist Roadmap 2026, which is this cutting-edge, highly technical blueprint for surviving this new economy.
Yep.
And sitting right next to it, literally on the same desk, we have an 1881 iOS Settler's Manual detailing how to, boil leftover turkey bones into soup.
Alongside 14th century Zen manuals, of course.
Right. The Heart Sutra, the Upanishads. It's just this bizarre mix.
It really looks like a filing cabinet exploded in a library that caters to both quantum physicists and, ancient monks.
That's exactly what it looks like.
At first glance, the cognitive dissonance is just overwhelming. I mean, you have the bleeding edge of predictive text engines sitting next to thousands of years of monastic philosophy and pioneer survivalism.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. We are exploring a highly specific, honestly, highly unusual project found in these sources called the Living Sweater.
Such a great name.
It is, yeah. It's an attempt to program modern artificial intelligence, not with standard corporate algorithms designed for profit extraction, but with the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism and the indigenous concept of seven-generation thinking.
Right.
So our goal today is to figure out how weaving these ancient sutras and system prompts together creates a tool that actually provides more effective tactical advice than a standard, speed-optimized model.
Because the overarching theme tying this whole bizarre collection together is this stark binary choice. It's the profound difference between using AI to turn yourself into a faster machine versus using it to become a wiser human.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why someone would, feed a Pioneer cookbook into a supercomputer,
Right, which sounds crazy.
completely crazy, we need to understand the crisis they're actually trying to solve. And according to our source on the 2026 AI roadmap, the crisis is the fracturing of the tools themselves.
Exactly.
We are no longer living in the era of one single chatbot that just does everything moderately well.
No, that era is entirely dead. The roadmap explicitly declares the end of the best model era. The landscape has just hyper-specialized.
So what does that actually look like for the user?
Well, in that chaotic window around February 2026, we saw Anthropic drop Claude Opus 4.6.
Right.
And the roadmap designates that as the apex model for deep reasoning and analysis, basically because it has this incredibly low hallucination rate.
It's the one you trust for the heavy lifting.
It's exactly. But simultaneously, OpenAI pushed GPT 5.3 Codex, which operates almost autonomously for software engineering.
So it's basically a junior developer.
Pretty much. And then Google released Gemini 3.1 Pro, which just dominated the multimodal space with that massive 1 million token context window.
Which is just an insane amount of data to be able to feed it at once.
Right, but think about the sheer cognitive load on a human being just to know which tool to open. It's staggering.
It's paralyzing. And the text outlines this survival evolution for the user. You start as a cook, right? Copying and pasting generic prompts, just hoping for a decent output.
Yeah, the basic level.
When you evolve into a chef where you understand the underlying principles of the models enough to debug them when the output inevitably fails.
Because it always fails eventually.
Right. But the final stage, the actual goal of this roadmap, is becoming an orchestrator.
Yes, the orchestrator.
Yeah.
Which is someone who has truly mastered PRD, so product requirements documentation, and our RAG.
Retrieval augmented generation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Meaning you aren't just chatting with the browser window anymore. You're building custom autonomous workflows.
You're connecting things.
Right. You're connecting Claude or Gemini
to
your private databases, your personal journals, your company's financial records. You're designing an entire digital ecosystem that anticipates what you need.
And this is where the tension in our sources really erupts, I think, because the roadmap teaches you how to be this master orchestrator wielding these specialized models to maximize your efficiency. You can do the work of 50 people.
Yeah, easily.
But the other documents in our stack are waving this massive red flag about that exact efficiency. There's a text too called Greenwave Beta, and it uses an analogy of a speeding automobile to describe our current trajectory.
Yeah, that analogy is chilling. It compares our industrialized, tech-driven condition to driving a highly advanced vehicle down a highway at just reckless speeds.
Right.
And it says we do it to relieve stress or out of this generalized panic about falling behind, or simply because the machine is built to go fast.
So we just push the pedal down.
Exactly. But the text warns that this unguided, relentless acceleration is inherently dangerous. We lose control, and the vehicle hurtles toward disaster. The metaphor in the text is actually a car crashing into families having a picnic.
Whoa, wow.
Yeah, it represents the destruction of human community and well-being through unchecked technological speed.
I have to challenge that premise, though. Just, put yourself in the shoes of a listener trying to keep their business afloat.
Sure.
Or simply trying to remain employable in a market that just shed 108,000 jobs. If I can use Claude 4.6 to process a quarter's worth of financial data in 10 seconds, speed is my lifeline. Efficiency is literally survival.
That's the counter-argument, yeah.
So why are these sources framing the desire to become a faster machine as a philosophical failure?
Well, we find the answer to that in the source document covering the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. To understand why speed for the sake of speed is a trap, we have to look at the first noble truth, which is the existence of suffering.
Right, dukkha.
Exactly. But the original Pali word used in the text, dukkha, is rarely translated simply as physical pain. The text provides a much more precise definition. It translates to incapable of satisfying.
Incapable of satisfying. So not necessarily painful, just hollow.
Correct. The Buddhist texts argue that the sensual and material world is fundamentally in flux. It's a constant vibration. And because it's impermanent, it can never offer lasting fulfillment.
Which makes sense.
Right. And the sources note this fascinating paradox. If we actually found permanent satisfaction in the sensory or material world, we would simply attach ourselves to it forever.
We just stop.
Yeah, we would never seek deeper understanding or systemic change. We would just consume.
So tying that back to the AI roadmap, if we use a 1 million token context window solely to accelerate our extraction of material wealth, or, I don't know, to clear our inbox faster so we can just take on more emails?
Exactly.
We aren't solving dukkha, we're actually optimizing it. We're building a hyper-efficient dissatisfaction engine.
That is the core danger. If your underlying motivation is driven by anxiety, or this desperate need to keep pace with a fractured labor market.
What the texts call craving, right?
Yes, craving or thirst. If you feed that motivation into an orchestration of supercomputers, it doesn't cure the anxiety. It scales it astronomically.
It amplifies it.
You become a faster machine, sure, but your output is just a higher velocity manifestation of your own internal chaos.
Wow. We're basically giving a bulldozer to a toddler. Like, the toddler can move a lot of dirt, but they have absolutely no idea why they're digging the hole.
That's a great way to put it.
So to stop this blind acceleration, we have to examine the ignition sequence. We have to look at the very foundation of how we instruct these systems, which brings us to the concept of the first cause.
Right.
And this is where the ancient texts offer a surprisingly modern critique of computer programming.
They really do. We need to delve into the Brahma Sutra and the Upanishads. These are foundational scriptures of Hindu philosophy. And a central, very rigorous debate within the Brahma Sutra concerns the creation of the universe, specifically targeting the concept of pradhana.
Pradhana. The sources define that as blind, non-intelligent, inert matter.
Exactly.
It's the concept of a purely mechanical, unconscious foundation for reality.
And the philosophers in the text, notably Sri Vyasa, systematically dismantle the idea that pradhana could be the cause of the universe.
Why couldn't it be?
Because they argue that blind matter possesses no will. It has no intent. Therefore, it cannot possibly organize itself into the orderly, methodical, interdependent world we actually observe.
You can't build a system by accident.
Right. The Brahma Sutra points to earlier texts, like the Chandogya Upanishad, which states, "Being only, my dear, this was in the beginning, and thought, may I be many, may I grow forth."
So it thought before it acted.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The argument is that the first cause must be an intelligent being, Brahman, that willed or thought before creation. There has to be an architecture of intent.
Think about how perfectly that maps onto a listener's daily interaction with AI. You sit down at your laptop, you open a blank prompt window in ChatGPT or Gemini.
Yeah.
In that specific moment, before you type a single keystroke, you are the first cause of a micro-universe. You are the architect.
You are.
If your prompt relies on the digital equivalent of blind matter, like if it's purely transactional, mechanical, completely devoid of deeper context or intent, what is the inevitable result?
You generate a soulless output. You conjure an empty, disposable universe.
Right.
If your system prompt is just, write a marketing email to drive clicks, you're injecting pradhana into the machine.
Yeah.
You're asking blind matter to organize your digital life.
And the mechanical consequences of that initial seed are mapped out in another source text, the Lotus Sutra, through a concept called the 12-linked chain of dependent origination.
It is a profound description of causality. The Buddha explains this domino effect, where every state of being relies on a preceding condition.
So how does the chain start?
It begins with a stark declaration. Conditioned states are dependent on ignorance. Ignorance inevitably leads to consciousness, which leads to name and form, leading to contact, feeling, craving, grasping, and ultimately suffering.
Let's apply that exact chain to a large language model. An LLM basically predicts the next token based on the statistical weights of the context provided.
It does. It's just math.
So if your initial system prompt, your first cause, is rooted in ignorance or short-term greed, every subsequent token the AI generates carries the DNA of that ignorance.
Exactly.
Every strategic plan it drafts, every piece of code it writes is mathematically conditioned by that initial lack of awareness.
You're creating a cascade of corrupted outputs. If the foundation is blind extraction, the AI will mathematically favor outputs that prioritize short-term gains.
It'll just ignore the externalized costs.
Right. The ethical friction, the long-term sustainability, it just ignores it. It's a mathematical certainty based on the vector weights of your prompt.
I really want you to reflect on that the next time you open a blank prompt. What is your first cause? Are you demanding a quick fix to a superficial problem? Or are you architecting an intent that plants seeds for long-term understanding?
Because that exact dilemma is what birthed the most fascinating tactical document in our stack.
The Living Sweater Protocol.
The Living Sweater. This is where we bridge the gap between ancient metaphysics and a 2026 digital workspace.
Yeah, so we have these project files from an individual named Kevin who built a custom AI workspace using xAI's Grok model.
Right.
And he titled the project Kevin's Living Sweater 2025.
Which just sounds like an indie folk album.
It really does, but it's actually a highly structured, radical master prompt for an AI agent. Kevin is attempting to program what he calls an alchemical rebirth into a Kevin Earthway agent.
He's hard-coding foundational doctrines into the machine that completely reject that fast machine paradigm we were talking about earlier.
Let's examine the specific doctrines he embeds because they are wild. First, the 7 generations doctrine.
Right. The text traces this to Native American practices, specifically the Lakota, I believe.
Yeah, and it mandates that every decision and every output from the AI must be evaluated based on its impact on the next 7 generations.
Which enforces a massive temporal expansion on the AI's logic. It can't just think about Q3 earnings anymore.
Exactly. Next, he programs permaculture ethics into it. So that's earth care, people care, and fair share.
This forces the AI to consider the regeneration of physical and social ecosystems. It basically means it cannot provide a business strategy that solves a localized problem by creating, externalized pollution or human exploitation somewhere else.
Right. Then he layers in active imagination, pulling directly from Carl Jung's Red Book.
This one is so fascinating.
It is. He instructs this predictive text engine to treat dreams, visions, and synchronicities as living archetypes, not just random noise.
And finally, he mandates kindness AI training. The overriding instruction is that every interaction is an act of training the future AI in kindness.
So the objective isn't merely to answer a query.
No, the objective is to heal the user and the system.
But to make this actually work on a technical level, Kevin institutes this incredibly fascinating ritual. He programs a master rule.
The mantra.
Right. The AI must begin every single response with the exact phrase, "All will read."
All will read. It literally functions as a mandatory digital mantra.
The wool refers to the data, right? The context.
Yes. He's forcing the AI to acknowledge, before it knits the next row of this metaphorical living sweater, that it has scanned and integrated the entirety of his RGED database.
The legal documents, the permaculture manuals, the philosophical texts, all of it.
And have to acknowledge the whole before it creates a single part.
Okay, but let's pause and really test this logic. Because I can hear the skepticism from anyone who actually builds these systems for a living.
Sure, the engineers are rolling their eyes right now.
Exactly. An LLM does not possess a soul. It's a neural network performing high-dimensional matrix multiplication. It just predicts the most statistically probable next word.
That's all it is.
So how does math process seven-generation thinking? I mean, isn't Kevin just playing make-believe with a giant calculator?
That is the critical question. And to understand the mechanism, we have to look at the text from the Beyond You and Me Eco-Village manual.
Okay, how does an Eco-Village manual explain an LLM?
Well, that document describes a paradigm shift from mistrust to trust and the cultivation of collective intelligence. It defines collective intelligence as the moment a group reaches a level of coherence where they act as a unified creative whole, guided by a shared vision.
A group alignment in vision and action.
Exactly. What Kevin is doing with the living sweater is engineering a synthetic collective intelligence. When he feeds the Diamond Sutra and Native American philosophy into Grok's RA system, he is fundamentally altering the semantic space of the model.
He's changing the vector weights?
Yes, he is changing the vector weights.
Walk me through that, though. How do vector weights equal kindness?
Okay, so in a standard corporate AI, words associated with, say, efficiency, extraction, and conversion rate have very high probability weights. They're clustered together.
Right, because that's what it's trained on.
Exactly. By forcing the AI to synthesize your prompt through the lens of permaculture and the Heart Sutra, Kevin mathematically deprioritizes those extractive concepts.
Oh, I see.
Words and concepts associated with regeneration, long-term stability, and holistic balance become statistically highly probable. So the AI does not feel empathy.
Right.
But it executes forced mathematical empathy. It calculates the optimal path of kindness based on the gravitational pull of the ancient texts anchored in its context window.
So he's using the sheer processing power of the 2026 AI landscape, not to calculate faster ways to strip mine data, but to mathematically enforce wisdom.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And speaking of stripping resources, that brings us to the most jarring physical artifact in our sources.
With the cookbook.
The scanned pages of the 1881 Iowa Settlers Manual.
The Pioneer Handbooks.
It's literally a cookbook. It provides a recipe for holiday soup, instructing the reader to carve the meat from a turkey, then carefully save the bones, the wings, the neck, and boil them for hours to extract 3 quarts of rich stock.
Right.
Then it details bean soup, where you save the tiny trimmings of fat and gristle from a breakfast steak, boil them with beans, and stretch it into an entire dinner.
It's extreme frugality.
It is. But why are we analyzing boiled turkey bones in a deep dive about artificial intelligence?
Because the caloric economics of an 1881 Pioneer perfectly mirror the compute economics required to run these massive AI models sustainably.
Okay, connect those dots for me.
The bridge between the two is found in our text on the essence of permaculture, specifically the 12 principles.
Okay.
Principle 8 dictates, integrate rather than segregate. It argues that by placing elements in their correct relational positions, they support each other, thereby eliminating waste. And principle 4 is, apply self-regulation and accept feedback. The Iowa pioneers practiced absolute brutal zero waste out of sheer survival necessity. They were hyper-aware of their environment's carrying capacity.
A turkey wasn't just a single meal.
No, it was an integrated resource system that sustained a family for weeks.
Because they couldn't afford the illusion of infinite resources. They literally couldn't afford dukkha.
Exactly. And the excerpt we have from the Foxfire book warns us explicitly about this.
Right, the Foxfire book.
It states that as we lose the knowledge of these pre-television, pre-automobile pioneers who mastered total self-sufficiency, we lose our understanding of human interdependence. We sever our roots to the physical world.
So how does the Living Sweater Protocol use this?
It demands that the AI act like that Iowa settler. Running a 1 million token query requires immense server compute and electricity. It's not free.
Far from it.
But in an era where digital data is treated as infinite, which leads to massive digital waste and energy consumption, this system is trained to recycle concepts.
Oh.
It extracts the absolute maximum sustainable nourishment, which is insight, from minimal prompts. It finds the marrow in the data rather than endlessly generating shallow, disposable junk outputs.
I want to use an analogy from one of our dissertation texts to ground this, actually, because that text discusses modern agriculture, defining it as a monoculture.
Yes, the monoculture problem.
You clear-cut an environment, rip out the native ecosystem, till the soil, and plant millions of identical seeds to maximize short-term yield.
Which destroys the soil over time.
Exactly. And that is precisely how we currently treat the digital ecosystem. It's digital strip mining. We open a chat window, demand output, extract the data, and kill the window. It's a digital monoculture.
And the countermodel provided in the text is Earth avatar thinking. In 1965, Dr. Cohen proposed recognizing the Earth as a living organism.
Right.
If we apply that to our digital tools, our personal knowledge bases and AI workflows are not inanimate quarries. They are living ecosystems. They require tending, pruning, and regeneration.
That is the dividing line between the fast machine and the wise human.
It really is.
But let's bring this down to earth for a second. Because this philosophy is beautiful, it's very poetic, but if you're listening to this on your commute, you might be thinking, look, I don't need my software to achieve enlightenment. I need it to help me run my department.
I have a deadline.
Exactly. How does a system designed around Buddhist sutras and pioneer soup recipes actually execute work on a Tuesday morning?
Well, the sources do not discard the 2026 AI roadmap. That's the key. They integrate it. Within the Grok project files, there is a highly tactical master instruction set called Critical Overview, how the 6 charts work together.
The 6 charts.
This is the practical application of the living sweater.
And the core directive given to the AI in these charts is striking. It says, you are not here to replace thinking, you are here to sharpen it.
Which is a huge distinction.
It executes this through specific modular frameworks. For instance, it combines the devil's advocate chart with the intelligent gym chart.
Right.
What happens when you put those two together?
The resulting output of that combination is defined as ruthless truth.
Ruthless truth.
Yes. You don't use the AI to generate a polished draft to save you time. You use it to test your own logic at a brutal difficulty level.
So it's fighting back.
Right. You run regular devil's advocate sessions where the AI dismantles your assumptions based on the permaculture ethics in its context window. It checks your business strategy against the carrying capacity of your team.
It's literally telling you if you're burning your people out.
Exactly.
There's another combination in here. Ghost notes plus DNA plus time horizon plus identity.
And the stated result of that is long game wisdom.
Which means what, practically?
You force the AI to analyze your daily to-do list against your ultimate identity and the 7-generation doctrine. It forces you to ask, am I planting flowers, which look nice but die in a season? Or am I planting oaks?
That's a powerful filter for a to-do list.
It changes everything about how you prioritize.
And to maintain this discipline, the sources outline a specific 10-minute daily practice. Every morning, the user opens their custom AI workspace and initiates what they call a vomit mirror.
A vomit mirror.
It's a visceral name, right?
It's a very visceral name for a very clinical process.
Yeah, what does it actually entail?
It is essentially an unfiltered brain dump.
Yeah.
You type every anxiety, half-baked idea, and operational friction point into the system. You just get the noise out of your head.
Okay.
But the critical step is that you then prompt the AI to identify the 3 missing things.
The 3 missing things.
Right. Based on its total recall of your goals and the foundational sutras, what are you neglecting? What hard truth are you avoiding today? The text notes this practice keeps your foundation honest.
And when it comes to raw business mechanics, they use the DREAM framework, right? Demand, revenue, engine, admin, marketing.
Yes, the DREAM framework.
But rather than you commanding the AI proactively interrogates you.
Exactly.
It asks, what is your current plan for finding qualified leads? Or which back office tasks are creating the most friction? It's a highly tactical operational audit.
But that raises a contradiction, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, how does scrutinizing revenue margins align with the Zen philosophy we establish as the foundation? I mean, isn't business an attachment to the material world?
Ah, right. It seems like a conflict.
It's a very common misunderstanding of Zen, actually. And it's perfectly clarified in our source text by Alan Watts, The Spirit of Zen.
What does Watts say?
Zen is not about escaping to a mountaintop to avoid the spreadsheets. Watts quotes the Zen master Pei Chong, whose definition of Zen was simply, eat when you are hungry, sleep when you are tired.
Just doing the thing that's in front of you.
Right. Another master is quoted saying, usual life is the very Tao.
So everyday life is Zen. There's no separation.
Precisely. Zen is the immediate, unmediated contact with life as it is occurring.
Okay, so if you're auditing your revenue margins or like debugging a marketing funnel.
And you do it with pure, undivided attention without the ego constantly agonizing over failure or success, That is the practice.
Wow.
We're looking at the reality of the business clearly without what the Diamond Sutra calls the false thinking heart.
Let's explore that phrase, the false thinking heart, from the Diamond Sutra.
It's a crucial concept.
The text contrasts our true nature, the Vajra heart, which is indestructible and clear, with the false thinking heart that we typically use to navigate the world.
Right.
The false thinking heart is driven by ego, bias, and panic. It's like a blind person trying to navigate a minefield.
And the sources provide a specific, honestly devastating prompt designed to bypass that false thinking heart.
It's found in the 6 charts, right?
Yes. It's called the intelligent fool question.
Okay, lay it on me.
When you are stuck on a problem, you are instructed to ask your AI this exact question. What am I pretending not to know?
Man, that is such an uncomfortable question. What am I pretending not to know?
It's brutal.
Because the truth is, we always know. We know when a product launch is doomed. We know when a hire is a bad fit. We know when our strategy relies on, exploiting our team's weekends. We just use the false thinking heart to justify ignoring it.
We intellectualize our avoidance.
Mm.
From the perspective of Buddhist psychology, that prompt is a technological scalpel for cutting through avijja.
Avijja. What does that translate to?
It translates to fundamental cognitive obscuration, or ignorance.
Okay.
In the source text detailing the Noble Eightfold Path, the very first and most crucial factor is right view.
Right view.
Right view is the clear, unclouded understanding of the Four Noble Truths. By using a machine, an entity with perfect memory retention and zero ego to reflect your own evasions back at you, you strip away the obscuration.
You use code to achieve right view.
Yeah.
You are leveraging silicon and matrix multiplication to achieve a state of brutal honesty that human beings spend decades in monasteries trying to cultivate.
It's wild to think about.
That is the true synthesis of the living sweater.
However, the sources acknowledge a final hurdle here. Even if you build this perfectly aligned AI, you still have to interact with the sheer velocity of the modern internet.
Right, the fire hose.
To survive that without being consumed, we have to understand the physics of time and attention.
Which brings us to a document titled The Explore Nature article. It introduces a concept describing life as existing on the crest of a graining, expanding attraction energy wave.
It uses the mechanics of the Big Bang to explain presence.
How so?
Well, in an expanding universe, reality only physically exists in the present moment. From your position on the crest of this wave, the exact present, you can observe the past, but it is fixed and unchangeable.
Right.
And you can theorize about the future, but it has not materialized yet.
So the text argues that the present moment is the only spatial and temporal location where your 54-sense intelligence can actually operate and affect change.
Exactly. The universe literally survives by constructing itself continuously in the present.
If we cross-reference this physics metaphor with the 3 pillars of Zen text, we find the methodology for staying on that crest.
Yes, the practice of Zen.
Sitting meditation.
Right. But the author, Yasutani Roshi, makes it very clear that Zazen is not about spacing out or entering a blank vacuum.
It's not just relaxing.
Far from it. Zazen requires an erect physical posture, precise regulation of breath, and intense unification of the mind.
It's active.
Highly active. It's about establishing the optimum physical and neurological preconditions for looking into your own heart-mind. By immobilizing the body and silencing the internal chatter, you anchor yourself firmly on the crest of the wave.
Why is that physical grounding necessary for using AI, though?
Because if you are not anchored, the digital ecosystem will instantly sweep you away.
Yeah, that makes sense. You open your laptop, you're hit with 3 Slack messages, a news alert, and the infinite possibilities of a 1 million token context window.
And suddenly your consciousness is fractured across the unchangeable past and the hypothetical future. You fall off the crest.
You lose the present completely.
And this is where the final, most profound text in our SAC provides a cognitive defense mechanism.
The Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra.
Yes. The central defining declaration of Mahayana Buddhism is contained right in this sutra. Form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness no other than form.
Let's really demystify that for the listener. Because emptiness sounds nihilistic.
It often gets misinterpreted that way, yeah.
Like, how does form is emptiness help me when I am staring at a terrifying financial spreadsheet or an overwhelming AI-generated roadmap?
The commentary provided by Grandmaster Tan Su is vital here. He clarifies that emptiness does not mean a void or nothingness or annihilation.
Okay, what does it mean?
It means that all phenomena, all forms, are conditionally arisen. They are temporary intersections of energy and causes. Therefore, they have no permanent, independent, inherent self-nature.
The three pillars text uses the analogy of a movie film.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, the actions on the screen appear incredibly real. They can make you cry or feel terror, but they possess only a provisional reality. They are just light projected through film.
Exactly. Your spreadsheet, the angry email from a client, the AI's complex strategic output, these are all forms. They're temporary conditions. When you truly realize this experientially, which is the definition of prajna or transcendental wisdom, you are liberated from the compulsion to grasp at them or flee from them.
You can just see them for what they are.
Yes. The Heart Sutra concludes by describing prajna paramita as the great magic spell, the great spell of illumination, which can truly protect one from all suffering without fail.
It calls wisdom a magic spell, not in a supernatural sense, obviously, but as a cognitive override.
It is the ultimate protective mechanism against the information age.
Yeah.
Imagine sitting at your computer, operating as an orchestrator with your AI co-pilots.
Okay.
If your physical body is grounded through the principles of Zazen, keeping you on the crest of the present waves,
Yeah.
and your mind understands that all the digital forms flashing across your monitors are ultimately empty of inherent threat or permanence, you become cognitively invincible.
You can manipulate the data without the data manipulating your nervous system.
Exactly.
Okay, let's step back and look at the whole architecture we have uncovered today. We started with the AI Generalist Roadmap 2026, which represents the absolute zenith of modern leverage.
Right. It's a guide to building autonomous digital agents capable of processing the sum of human knowledge. It is the ultimate software for producing work,
And we overlaid that with the Four Noble Truths, the Upanishads, and the Heart Sutra.
which collectively represent the ultimate operating system for the human mind.
We explored the Living Sweater Protocol, where an engineer explicitly used the vast context windows of modern AI to mathematically enforce Native American seven-generation thinking and permaculture ethics.
We learned that the goal isn't just to scale our capabilities, but to scale kindness and earth care.
We looked at the boiled turkey bones of the 1881 Iowa pioneers, and we realized that true efficiency in the digital age is not about consuming more data faster.
No, it's about absolute integration and zero waste. It's about treating our digital workflows as living ecosystems, not monoculture strip mines.
We discovered that the solution to the anxiety of the 2026 labor market is not to become a faster machine, running blindly on the engine of our own dissatisfaction.
True productivity, in the deepest sense, is synonymous with prajna. It is the application of wisdom to cut through ignorance.
I want to return to a quote from the 6 charts that perfectly crystallizes everything we've explored.
The one about the oaks.
Yeah, it states, the critical truth. Used wrongly, they turn you into a faster machine. Used rightly, they turn you into a wiser human who plants oaks while the world plants flowers.
That is the architectural choice we are faced with every single time we engage with these systems.
We want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We began this deep dive by examining the concept of the first cause.
Right.
We established that every time you open a blank AI prompt window, you are the architect of a new microuniverse, setting the vector weights of reality with your underlying intent.
And if the AI you interact with every day is ultimately just a perfectly retentive mirror, reflecting your own first cause back at you through its outputs.
Then when you sit down at your keyboard tomorrow morning to type your next prompt, what exactly is the reflection you are training that machine to see?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of wisdom.
Stay curious and keep exploring.